Next up, we have Dr. Sanjay Sethi, who's the
Thank
medical
you.
director of the Clinical Research Office, who will talk a little bit more about the clinical research that you can do here at the University of Buffalo. And I'll just put this right over to Dr. Sethi. Go ahead.
Thanks, Karen. Can everybody hear me? Are we good? Okay, great. So, yeah, I'm going to talk about clinical research facilitation. Are you seeing the proper full screen, or do I have to switch?
We're seeing your presenter view.
Okay, so let me keep things moving on. So I'm Sanjay Sethi. I'm a pulmonologist. I run the Division of Pulmonary Critical Care and Sleep Medicine at UB, and also direct the Clinical Research Office, and I'm a Deputy Director on the Clinical and Translational Science Institute. So I'll be talking mostly about the Clinical Research Office. I prefer to call it Clinical Research Facilitation because that's what the Research Office does. And we'll be looking into the different aspects of it. This is in no way in the time we have very totally comprehensive. It's just a sampling of how you will go through the clinical research process, all the different kind of steps there, how and where the CRO or the Clinical Research Office plays a role, and how do we work with the other aspects of the other research support offices across the university. Well, first thing you want to know is whether is it a research project that you're doing or not? And especially if you have trainees, and this is not uncommon that what they might be doing could be something that could be deemed as quality assurance or quality improvement. And therefore, you do not need to get involved with either the IRB, with Rich's office, or my office at all. So what we did last year was institute this self-assessment tool. Because previously you had to actually put in a whole thing to the IRB and wait for them to respond. But now, prior to doing that, you can actually differentiate between QA, QI, and IRB in most instances. So this assessment tool is available. You do it. If it turns out to be you meet all the 6 criteria for QA, QI, you get a certification and you're good to go. If it doesn't do that, if it becomes very clear to you that what you thought was QA, QI is actually research, then follow the process of applying. Or there's an intermediate situation where you're not sure, and then you can talk with one of our clinical research facilitators, and the link to that is available. So this is a kind of a relatively new thing we started, which has been working quite well. So then once you've decided it is research, then where does the Clinical Research Office comes into play? It comes into play if you're doing clinical research. And this is the NIH definition of clinical research. And it's kind of, if you look at it, I'm sure Jill will want to share these slides. I'll send them to you to share. But it's a fairly broad spectrum of what fits into the NIH definition of clinical research. So it's kind of patient-oriented research, even epidemiological and behavioral studies, outcomes research, all of those fall into the realm of clinical research. And then within the realm of clinical research is clinical trials, which is more specific, where you're actually going to do an intervention and look at outcomes. So then you need to know also whether you're doing a clinical trial or not. So these definitions have actually important practical value. So what happens if you have a clinical research that you're doing? It could be unfunded, which means that you're internally funding it, or the department's funding it, or just you're doing it on your own time. There are still some issues that need to be looked at. So you still may want to work. You'll have to still work with the IRB, but you still may want to work with the Clinical Research Office on some of the regulatory issues, some of the aspects of working with our affiliated hospitals. So you still may want to work with us. If it's funded, if it's federal funding, currently the way we are doing it is sponsored programs takes the primary role, and then we help along with them, we work with that. If it's non-federal funding, which could be industry mainly, but also could be foundations and others, then the research office, the CRO, takes a primary role in this and works with the sponsored program services. We try to make it more kind of, this does create confusion sometimes. Sometimes we don't get involved fast enough, or vice versa. We want to kind of make it more that from your end as an investigator, you know it's clinical research, you follow a certain path in it. We kind of internally figure out who's doing what. But right now that's not the situation. So, but if you do have federal funding, like a federal flow through or a federal funding, and you are working with SPS, do reach out to us too, because we want to get involved early. because of a lot of reasons, as you'll see next. So, Richard must have covered the IRB concerns. It's concerned with protection, conflict of interest, how you're going to recruit patients, PHI, and therefore, all of those falls into the IRB concerns. So what are our concerns in the clinical research office? So our concerns are with the pre-award, we want to make sure that that there are proper agreements in place, that university interests are protected and well represented. Are you taking on clinical research that's feasible? So the possible, there's no taking on a clinical research project where you don't even have the ability to complete it. Is the funding appropriate? That's where budget comes in. If it's a clinical protocol, especially a clinical trial, who's paying for what? Are things being done which are specific to the study and they should not be paid by the patient's insurance, or even worse, Medicare? Or other things that are are normal standard of care, and then those need to be covered by insurance. Regulatory issues, INDs, IDEs, if you have new devices, clinicaltrial.gov. We don't have our own hospital, so are the affiliated institutions appropriately informed and compensated? And then we can help with some aspects of study design, though there are other offices that are helping with that now. In terms of once you then get the award, then if it's, we want to get all clinical research to be able to follow it and assess it, and especially with clinical trials to build for it, we need to get it into our clinical trial management system, or ENCORE. Then while the trial is going on, if it's a funded trial, there's a lot of invoicing and accounting with the sponsor, which we take care of. We do have coordinators that can work on your project part-time if that's all you need and you don't have one of your own. And then there is a clinical research center at the CTSI building, at the CTRC building, which is available for clinical protocols. I don't have a full slide on that, but if you're interested in looking for space where you want to see participants in clinical research, we actually have space affiliated with all the, with the lab and storage space and a pharmacy available there. And then post-award, we want to help you with closing the study, and if there's money left over, to moving it into a residual funds, which you can then use for other research or education, etc. So these are all the things that we play a role with, which are distinct from what the IRB does. So basically, we're charged with the administrative and financial oversight of all clinical research. And we want to touch all human research so we can make sure that these aspects are taken care of. And I've already covered what you see on the right. Now, we are not the CTSI, but we are really closely worked with them. I know later Dr. Tim Murphy is going to talk about the CTSI, but we are very well kind of coordinated, and because, it's so that you don't, so that we actually, as I'll show you, we actually guide you towards the CTSI where they have the services that you need for your clinical research. So this is the current workflow that we have created for clinical research within the university. And so if you have a clinical research protocol, you can see there are 3 of these, what we call electronic environments that you'll be working in. One is a central study registration, and I'll spend some time on that. Then we move it into the CLIC environment, which I'm sure you already heard about, where you do the IRB aspects and lots of other aspects. And then there's the clinical trial management system environment. So what I want to highlight over here is this is an iterative process. There's a research team, there is a clinical research office, and then we also can bring in the CTSI cores as needed or guide you towards them, and we'll show you how we like to do it. The other thing I want to stress is this word parallel processing. So the last thing you want to do is get a protocol, get your IRB approval, then get your contractor done, then get your, find your coordinators. You don't want to do that. You want to do all of that simultaneously. So that's what we are, work towards, and have been pretty successful in trying to bring all these different things working and then bringing them to one conclusion, and then you can get your study going. So you're not waiting for, one aspect which has not been put in place. Because having an IRB approval doesn't mean you can start a study. If you don't have your contract negotiated, you can't start a study with a sponsor. So you really have to have all of those things in place. So who makes up the clinical research office? We have 2 associate directors, and then we have people who work on devices, budgets, contracts, CDAs, implementation of the clinical trial management system, billing and accounts. Then we have study coordinators. And then, as I mentioned, we are highly integrated with the, I'm going to use the slide again. We're highly integrated with the CTSI. So there are actually 2 clinical research facilitators who are supported by the CTSI, but are very much integrated into the research office. Same with Lynn Jakuzinski, who's a regulatory knowledge and support person, supported by the CTSI, but working with us, the recruitment coordinators, QA, QC coordinators. And so all of these individuals are very well integrated into our the clinical research office. So I'll focus on a few aspects of it, the central study registration, then I'll talk about this pre-IRB review, and then I'll talk about encore. And as I said, there are a lot of other things we do, but I'll touch on those mainly. So anything, you're contemplating to start a clinical research protocol, we want you to register it into this clinical research, central registration. So this is the website where you can go and do it, and you can register your study here. And the registration process, I won't again go through all the steps, but part of the registration process is allowing you to tell us what you need. What is your resource assistance that you need? So you complete the registration process, and then what will happen is, after it's being reviewed by us, by the research office, then we will send you a summary email that telling you about things that you need to do to get this protocol in place. So that's one aspect of it, with all sorts of links and informations. And we just don't tell you do this, but we give you all the resources you need to be able to do that. And so that's one of the aspects you get. There are other, and this opens up a dialogue. The second thing it does is we get the scientific review process going, which we get done. That's also part of our role in this research office. But then we also start the protocol off in the CLIC environment, and if necessary, in the CTMS or the encore environment. So then when you start going into CLIC, you already have the study kind of, some of the building is, some of the documents are there, the essential information is there, and then you add more, your documents, your protocol, your 503, etc., consent, you start adding that in there. But we don't expect you to provide us all the information and then have to do it again here and again here. No, we want to start from here, and this we then feed.
Appears that Dr. Sethi's connection has frozen. I'll give him a few minutes to see if he can log off and log back on.
Karen, I think there's only 3 minutes left, so maybe I did see that Dr. Murphy is online already, and he has permissions to share. So maybe you just want to roll, and obviously we'll share the presentation from Dr. Sethi. Let's take the pressure off of him. He's actually home recuperating from a shoulder surgery anyhow. So
Yes,
it was amazing that he did this. So
yes, and actually there's been a couple of people that have asked in the chat if the slides will be available. We will make these available as long as the presenters provide them to us. We will share those.